Raise the flag.
Light the cauldron. We declare the game's Odyssey open.
Welcome to the Games Odyssey podcast, your home for stories of glory from Olympia to now. I'm Jonathan Jordan.
And I'm Sarah Patton.
And today is another practice episode because we needed a lot of practice. And really, it was more I needed a lot of practice after listening to our first episode. That's the truth of it. As we were just talking about, I'm a rambler when I get excited about things, so I'm going to try to tone it down a little bit, be a little bit more chill. It's just hard for me to be chill when talking about the Olympics and Paralympics.
And if you ever happen to be listening to this episode for whatever reason, I'm sure that you can relate.
Well, people will listen to it eventually because it will be a bonus episode for the sponsors that we don't have yet, but hopefully one day we'll have. So they can have a lot of fun laughing at us, just like hopefully they did on the first part. So for this episode, we're going to continue the conversation from the last practice episode, talking about the history of sports. We're pretty much just going to pick up where we left off. So a quick recap in case you got tired of hearing my rambling on part one and skipped through the rest of the episode. We learned that sports has been around for at least 5,000 years. Maybe even longer. Maybe we're giving humans too much credit. For all we know, dinosaurs had roaring competitions. Anything's possible. At least I believe anything is possible. However, we also discussed briefly that it was the Olympic Games at Olympia that really codified and standardized what regular sporting events should look like. So, while a lot of things have changed. For the most part, you could drop us into ancient Olympia and we would have some sense of the rules and what was going on. That being said, we're going to pick right up where we left off, right around 1,000 years ago. And we're going to kick things off talking about some sports where you swing sticks at things, because humans apparently really like to do that. So we're going to take a quick little break, and then Sarah's actually going to start us off talking about that. So we'll be right back in a second. All right, so as promised, we're going to talk about some sports where you swing sticks at things, and that includes things like tennis, golf, lacrosse, a whole host of sports. But Sarah, tell us about tennis.
All right. I will take a swing at tennis.
Oh, geez.
All right. So just like in last episode, we're going to see that there's a lot of evidence suggesting that once again, we've got Greeks that were a part of this, along with Romans and Egyptians. They played a game resembling tennis, but court tennis descended from a game enjoyed by the 11th century French monks called paume. We think that is a French word. So our French friends out there, help us out if we're wrong. And that translates to palm. And this game was played on a court and the ball was struck with the hand. So imagine literally hitting a ball with your hand.
I mean, I can imagine that. I've done it before. I don't necessarily recommend it, but at the beginning of the pandemic, when we were stuck inside and just trying to figure out how to pass time, my son and I came up with a lot of really interesting games, and I'm pretty sure one of them involved just hitting a ball back and forth with our hands. So I'm on board with the French monks.
Yeah, my brother and I, growing up, we used to play baseball in the house with socks with a similar concept. Someone would throw a sock and we'd hit it with our hands. My mom is probably grateful we did that instead of actual baseballs. But coming back to tennis, rackets were later constructed of wooden frames and gut strings by the 1500s. And this sport was played exclusively indoors, where players would try to hit the ball into a netted opening in the room of the court.
Okay.
What do you think about that?
what I think about that is they made it more complicated than it needed to be. If it's me, I feel like it's way more natural hitting the ball back and forth to each other, not trying to hit it through a netted opening in the roof of the room that we're playing in. It sounds like that might take a little bit more skill, and maybe they were trying to create a challenge for themselves, but it does not make more sense than today's modern version of tennis. Just my 2 cents.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And it reminds me of our discussion with our friend in the rugby situation that just picked up the ball and ran with it one day. That I wonder if you had some players that were participating in this game and then decided, wait a minute, what happens if we just hit it back and forth? Could this be more fun?
It was the 2 laziest people there who were just like, we're done hitting it through the ceiling. We're just going to do this from now on. And then everyone else probably just stood there and said, yeah, we're on board with that. That makes a lot more sense. That's what I think.
I like this theory. I can get on board with that.
Yeah.
Ah, all right. So we're going to take it forward a few years, and the modern version of outdoor tennis, as we know it, actually evolved in 1873. And I will admit that tennis is not, well, modern tennis, I should say, is not as old as I expected it to be. I don't know why, but I just thought it would be older. So,
I hadn't even given it a thought, to be honest. I've never played tennis. I'm impressed by it, but to this day, I'm really confused by the scoring. So, I just had never given that a thought.
Yeah, I don't know why I thought that. Maybe it's just because I knew it came from Europe, and since we're here in Texas in the United States, we're used to things that are popular here just being young because we're a young country. So I just assume everything from Europe is old. Forgive me if that's very stereotyping or if I'm stereotyping too much. And then, so modern version, 1873. It was just a few years later, in 1881, that the first year of the Men's U.S. National Tennis Championship, which became a precursor for the U.S. Open, that is the year that it occurred.
All right.
Yeah, so I said that kind of funny.
That's all right. I say lots of things funny. Yeah, I mean, that really isn't that long ago when you think about it, but it makes sense, too. Like we talked about in the last episode, sports really started catching on in the 1800s. So now that I'm thinking about it, it does kind of make sense that people would start revisiting some of these old games, but actually coming up with rules for them around that time period. So I guess it does make a lot more sense now that I've had a chance to think about it.
Yeah. Tennis was included in the, as we call it, the OG Olympics in 1896 until the 1924 Paris Games. Then it was removed because of disagreements between the IOC and the International Tennis Federation. Then it was brought back as a demonstration sport in 1968 and 1984 and has been in the games consistently since Seoul 1988. So it's been kind of all over the place, but I predict it's going to stick around for the foreseeable future. What do you think?
Yeah, I don't see it going anywhere, but it really does kind of surprise me that it didn't become one of the standard sports until 1988. That I would not have guessed because it is such a popular game. Even though I've never played it, I know lots of people who have, and so it just seems like one of those things that's always been around. So the fact that it was missing from the games for so long, especially when it was introduced pretty early on, is a little strange. So there must have been some real beef between the IOC and the International Tennis Federation. I don't know what it was, but they clearly had it for each other during that time.
Yeah, and I'm sure we'll eventually talk about that a little bit more, but I will say a few years ago, I got curious and I actually took tennis lessons for adults.
Nice.
And I really recommend it. I still get confused by scoring after a whole year of tennis lessons, But it's great. It's a good sport. And one thing that I really appreciate about tennis is that it does not matter how old you are, you can learn. You may not, the tennis center that I went to, it's a recreational facility, and there were people there who were a lot younger than me. And honestly, those kids could school me any day. They were amazing. And then there were people that were older and learning for the first time. And they may not be as quick as some of the younger people, but they could hold the racket and try it. And so I appreciate sports that people can do throughout their lives, kind of like walking or jogging. It's not like gymnastics to where you can just swing on a bar at the age of 80 without training.
I mean, speak for yourself. I plan to swing on a bar when I'm 80. I don't do it now, but when I'm 80, it's definitely on my list to do. So, but yeah, tennis, maybe I'll give it a try one of these days. Does it count if I've played Mario Tennis? Because that I have done.
I'd say it counts for something.
Not for much, apparently, though, from your tone. I have played golf, and I want to talk about golf. So tell me about that.
Funny that you've played golf because I have not, other than putt-putt. And I've done Top Golf, but I swing like a softball player, and so I irritate people when they go to Top Golf with me because they try to tell me how to do it, and I just, no thank you. All right, so golf actually descended from a game originating in Scotland in the 1400s. So we're going way back.
Yeah, I mean, I play in a kilt, so totally makes sense.
Make sure when you play in a kilt that you post pictures of that. People will enjoy that.
Oh, no, I can't do that because I was lying, so never mind. It didn't happen.
I had a feeling. All right, so golf and football were officially banned in Scotland in 1457 by King James II. It was blamed for its rising popularity, keeping responsible men from more useful pursuits like archery and sportsmanship that would have been more useful as Scotland was defending its borders against English invasion. The prohibition against golf was lifted in 1502 at the signing of the Treaty of Glasgow.
I love that. I love the fact that golf had to be banned by the king because it was distracting people from being better archers and swordsmen to keep away the invading English hordes. I love it.
Yeah, I think I can just imagine King James and all his little leaders just telling these guys, like, yeah, you're not manly enough. What are you doing with your, like, you can hit a ball? Like, no, that's not good enough. You can't defend our land.
Yeah, I mean, I get it. Golf is a long game. You're out there on the course for several hours at least. And think about how many arrows you can shoot and how many people you can stab in that amount of time. So I can definitely see why it was taking up so much time from people being ready for warfare. But anyway, we should probably talk about something else besides stabbing.
So in 1500s, golf was popularized in England by King Charles I, and Mary Queen of Scots introduced it to her homeland of France. So it started to travel a little bit.
Okay. Yep. Made it to the continent of Europe, that is. All right. Got it.
And then golf was in the games in 1900 and 1904, and then it was gone before being reinstated at the 2016 Rio Games.
And that's really surprising to me as well, that it was that long of a gap. I mean, that's over 100 years. Well, is that right? I'm terrible at math. Yes, over 100 years that it was absent from the Olympic Games. I don't think I really realized that before doing the research for this episode. So, insane. Yeah,
I'm not the kind that sits there and watches golf on TV. I certainly started paying more attention to it because of the 2016 Olympic Games. But I don't know. I have some snarky things I could say about it, but I don't know if I should.
You're not alone there. I don't like watching golf on TV either. And to be fair, I don't play it the way that I used to. I played it quite a bit in high school. And I like to tell people I didn't have anger issues until I took up golf. And then I discovered my anger issues. So it's a game that I really enjoy and I do like playing it, but it was better for everyone around me for me to not play it. So kind of like you, nowadays I stick with Topgolf. That gives me my golf fix, but there's no stakes involved with it. So I'm able to be a bit more chill with it the way it probably was meant to be from the beginning. So
yeah, and I'm okay with it being in the Olympics. I think it's, of other things that have been considered to be in the Olympics, I think it's one of the better options. But I don't know, the history of people thinking that maybe participants weren't tough enough, for the United States at least, it was the golf athletes who were scared of Zika while everyone else decided to go to Rio. So you had a lot of golfers that didn't want to participate and they blamed Zika, whereas really I think they just couldn't be inconvenienced because the Olympics didn't matter that much to them. And that's just really sad. But to piggyback on that, though, for the 2020 Olympics in Tokyo, it seemed like golfers were a lot more excited to be there. So maybe a tide is turning to where it's a lot more significant. But I'm not a professional athlete. I know that the money is more in the PGA Tour, all of that stuff. So I can't necessarily fault them. But as an Olympics and Paralympics fan, I'm like, go get your medal. Why wouldn't you try? You've got to go try.
Yeah, no, I mean, I could say the same thing. I like that it's an Olympic sport. Is it one that I'm going to sit there and watch the entirety of? No, but I like that it's in there because it is a really popular sport. It's an international sport, has been for a long time. It feels like it belongs, so the fact that it was gone for so long. And I think with Tokyo, it actually surprises me a little bit that it didn't get reintroduced until Tokyo because it is really popular in Japan. I would say probably more popular there than in Brazil, but I could be wrong. And also, on a side note, I had actually totally forgotten about Zika until you just brought it up. But that was a thing. That was a thing. So,
but it was only the golfers that, it was only specifically the United States golfers that said they didn't want to mess with it. And it was an excuse to say, I don't really care to go to the Olympics. And that's fine. I'm going to have a lot more respect when you just come out and say, I don't really want to go to the Olympics.
Right. Yeah, I guess so. I don't know. You're outside for a long time again with golf. And I know when I used to play, I definitely got bit by my fair share of mosquitoes. So I could see to some degree their concern and why they would choose to stay home. More so than maybe some other sports that even if they are played outside, they might have some time where they're sitting on the bench that they could put on some mosquito spray or something like that, where in golf, I don't know, it might be a little more challenging. Just trying to give them a little bit of grace, I think.
That's fair. That's fair.
All right. But yeah, let's go ahead and talk about our last sport actually not our last sport where you hit things with sticks, because we're going to get to hockey in a little bit. But for this section, we're going to talk about lacrosse, which I admit I don't know a ton about until I was researching this episode. But I did know this fact before the research. It actually began as a sport called stickball, which is a traditional Native American contest that's played between tribes, usually by the warriors for training purposes, recreation, religious purposes even. So once again, we've got a crossover with religion, just like in the ancient Olympic Games. And I don't think I put it in my notes here, but apparently at some point they decided it was also a good way for warring tribes to settle land disputes without having to actually go to war. So there was even this idea early on in the Americas that sports could be used as a peaceful way to resolve conflict rather than, we're going to talk about stabbing again, but rather than stabbing each other. And the contests for the Native American tribes that did play stickball could go on for days and days, kind of like we talked about in the last episode when we talked about rugby and when we talked about pedestrianism. And it does still continue to this day, especially in Oklahoma. In fact, my wife has a friend who is Native American, and until they moved recently, he was very involved with his tribe's stickball tournaments. And I'm kind of sad they moved away because I was really hoping to be able to actually go see it in person at some point, and now they live in Boston. So very selfish of them to move for his career when I wanted to see him play stickball. But
how dare they?
Yeah. So the question then is, how did stickball change into lacrosse? Well, in the 1630s, there were some French Jesuit missionaries. Apparently, French Jesuits, French monks, they really like their sports. I did not know that about them until starting to do the research for this. But anyway, it was the French Jesuit missionaries who saw it being played by the Algonquin tribe in the St. Lawrence Valley. And there was this guy called Jean de Brebeuf. Sorry if I butchered that pronunciation, but I think I got at least 75% there. But he was the guy who said, hey, this is really cool. It's one more thing that we can take from the natives. That's a direct quote. Okay, maybe it's not, but that's actually what happened. They decided to take the sport on themselves, and they gave it the name of lacrosse, which I'm assuming is French for preppy game. But satire aside, a big demonstration was given by the Kanawha tribe members in Montreal in 1834, and it caught on after that with a Canadian dentist by the name of William George Beers, who was really responsible for founding the Montreal Lacrosse Club in 1856. Now, what does this have to do with the Olympics? Well, lacrosse is not currently an Olympic sport. Yes, that's true, but it did feature in the 1904 and the 1908 games as a medal sport, and it has been a demonstration sport a few other times, so who knows, maybe it will come back one of these days and become an official Olympic sport, but it has been at least featured, so there you go.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see if it ever comes back, because with globalization and the way the world is so small right now, other than travel restrictions, because we're currently in a pandemic still, but lacrosse is a pretty popular university sport. And so I wonder if international students, if they end up coming to the United States to play, I don't know. I've never followed lacrosse closely myself. But maybe if NCAA sports kind of contribute to lacrosse becoming more popular overseas, I wonder if it'll eventually be back in the Olympics. And I think that would be very far down the road.
Yeah, I think it will take a little bit, but I do think it is gaining in popularity because here in North Texas, where we live, it actually has become a pretty popular sport. My wife and I have known quite a few people who have had their kids in lacrosse, which doesn't sound like a very Texan sport, but it's really caught on here. So you're right. Mm-hmm. If it continues to gain in popularity and it gets picked up by more countries, then it could definitely find its way back into the Olympics someday. But yeah, let's go ahead and move on and talk about some sports that get played with frozen H2O and talk about ice skating. What do you want to tell me, Sarah?
All right, ice skating. Ice skating dates back around 1,000 years ago, where natives of Scandinavia and the Netherlands would attach bones to their shoes in order to travel across frozen rivers, canals, and lakes. And yeah, it's just whenever we think back to our conversation about skiing, we're back in Scandinavia. And then I do see the Netherlands coming to play, because I've been to the Netherlands, and it's true, there are canals all over the place. It's not just something that you see on postcards. So I imagine that they were pretty desperate to figure out how to go across the canals. And speaking of the Dutch, It was around the 14th century that the Dutch started using wooden platform skates with flat iron bottom runners attached with leather straps and poles used to propel the skater. Narrow metal double-edged blades were attached around 1500 and made the poles obsolete. Push and glide motion called the Dutch roll is what they used. I've never heard of the Dutch roll. I would expect that to be a pastry.
I totally would have thought that was a pastry and been like, yes, please give me some of that. But I do love the idea of it originally just being a form of transportation out of necessity. And I can't help but wonder if it turned into, like, did early speed skating exist because if you didn't go fast enough, the ice would break and you would die? Was there an element of survival to it? I have to know that.
I think that's a good question. So,
yeah, we didn't research it. I don't know the answer, but I would love to know if that was the case.
I mean, kind of how you assume with, other sports like archery, there has to be some kind of survival component at some point. So, yeah. In 1592, a Scotsman designed a skate with an iron blade, and in 1763, the first known speed skating competition was organized. So
there it is.
Whether that was for survival or just glory, that is what we know to be the first competition.
It could have been for glorious survival. So
there you go. Then we're going to skip forward a few years, and an International Skating Federation was started in 1892, which was the first for any winter sport, which that was new information to me, that it's the oldest governing body, I guess, at the international level. And then figure skating was introduced in the 1908 Summer Olympics, but then ended up being included at the Winter Games, which has been going on since 1924. So who knew that ice skating was originally a Summer Olympic sport?
Yeah, and of course we'll get into this more when we actually talk about the history of the games, but at that time it wasn't called the Summer Olympics because there was no need to call it the Summer Olympics because there was no Winter Olympics. It was just the Olympic Games. So it is kind of funny to think about it now, looking back, that it would have been included. But yeah, it makes sense that once the Winter Games came along, they said, okay, you belong over here now.
Mm-hmm. And that's when the Olympics lasted forever, which
yes.
I know that we'll get into that. So much for 2 weeks.
Yeah, we will definitely get into that because it's hilarious.
And speed skating joined the official Olympic program in 1924, with the first ever gold medal for the sport being won by Charles Jutra from Lake Placid, New York. So speed skating, figure skating, it was figure skating that was introduced first, where I personally would have thought that they were flipped.
Yeah, I would have thought the same. And I don't know if it's just because figure skating is more, for lack of a better word, artistic, that you would have thought that someone would have thought it up later on by just saying, well, I'm not a very good speed skater, but I can do these amazing leaps. Check it out. So yeah, I definitely would have thought it would have been flip-flopped, if anything. So that's kind of cool. But on that note, now we can talk about some other sports where you swing a stick at things, which is hockey. I love hockey. My wife does not like watching sports in general, except for the Olympics and Paralympics. But if a game of hockey is on, she will pay attention to it. It's one of the few really popular sports that she actually enjoys watching. And while its origins are unclear, it's actually originally derived from field hockey, which is at least several centuries old and was started in Northern Europe. Field hockey may be as old as at least 510 BC, based on an ancient Greek relief that was found that depicted a game that strongly resembles field hockey. Now, we could be completely misunderstanding the artwork, but it did look like that was what they were playing. And it's really mostly in the U.S. and Canada that we call it field hockey, because in other places they know field hockey as just hockey, whereas we kind of flip-flop it and call ice hockey hockey. So I maybe have thoroughly confused everyone out there with saying those in such quick succession, but there it is. That's why you came here, to be confused. And in Sweden, they actually call it land hockey, and I can only suppose that's to distinguish it from sea hockey or air hockey. And I'm not going to lie, I wouldn't mind seeing space hockey one of these days.
Space Force is coming. Let's go.
Yeah, why not? Have a couple of astronauts floating around up there, hitting an asteroid back and forth. I'll pay to watch that. Sign me up.
Yeah. Maybe that'll be in the Olympics in the year 3000.
There you go. We can only hope. But the rules of modern ice hockey, as we would know it, was created by a Canadian. I know, that's a shocker. His name was James Creighton, and the first game that we would probably recognize was played in Montreal in 1875. Back then, the original pucks that they would use were actually flat circles of wood, and they had 9 players on each team instead of 6 like today. And I don't know about you, Sarah, but that sounds like a really crowded game.
Yeah. It's a lot. At least I would imagine. I don't know from experience, but it sounds like a lot.
I mean, I just think of watching hockey now and how quickly they move around the ice and how much they collide. And again, that's just with 6 players per team out there. You throw another 6 people out there, and I can only imagine the amount of collisions there were. But
it's a lot of missing teeth.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Because they didn't wear helmets back then. There's not a chance that there was any protective gear back then. And then field hockey, as we would call it, debuted first at the 1908 Games in London, but then it was removed for the 1924 Games, and I guess people really missed it because it came right back in 1928. And then ice hockey debuted at the 1920 Summer Olympics, as we would now call it, just like figure skating was originally part of the Summer Olympics. And it was only when the Winter Games, again, they didn't exist back then, so it transitioned to the Winter Game program in 1924, just like figure skating did. And then we get to a familiar topic here. Women's ice hockey was first contested at the 1998 Nagano Games because, of course, it took 74 years for women to get to participate on the world stage. So, yeah, I don't know what else to say about that. It's going to keep coming up over and over again, I'm sure. And then, of course, one of our favorites, at least I know this is one of our favorites, the adaptive sport of sled hockey, or sledge hockey, as it's called in some countries, was invented in the 1960s at a rehabilitation center in Sweden, and it's been included in the Winter Paralympics since 1994. And if you've never watched it, it is one of the most fun sports I think you can ever watch of all sports.
I am incredibly biased, but because hi Taylor. Yeah. But I had the privilege of going to high school and growing up a little bit with a sled hockey player. So I was introduced to the sport probably earlier than a lot of other people. But that being said, I was at least a little more familiar than most. But that being said, aware of my bias. I think sled hockey is a lot more fun to watch than hockey, than able-bodied hockey, that is. And it's so intense and it's just incredible. And this isn't just one of those things where you say, oh, the Paralympics are so inspirational. No, this is a hardcore sport. It is just so good. And it's exciting and it's thrilling. And these athletes, I cannot imagine pushing myself around the ice the way that they do.
No.
Like, my arms hurt just to watch it. And then that being said, because it always is going to come up, we don't see female teams in the Paralympics yet for sled hockey. But in the United States, at least, we know that the sport is growing. So I'm not personally familiar with how it's growing around the world for females, but I'm hopeful that, maybe in the next 20 years or so, we'll see it.
Well, I'll have to double check this, Sarah, but I'm pretty sure that women are actually playing sled hockey and are able to be on the team in the same way that we saw with murder ball, or what I should call wheelchair rugby, but I really like calling it murder ball. So in the same way that the British team that won gold, I'm still a little hurt by that, but the British team that won gold this year, they had a female on their team. And so I know from when I was working with Declan Farmer on a script last year about his experience in sled hockey, I believe that came up in some of our conversations where he was telling me about some of the training camps and some of the other types of adaptive hockey, because there's also blind standing hockey. There's also, I want to say there's also a version of standing hockey for the hearing impaired, but I'll have to double check on that. And I remember him telling me that you would see women out there on the ice too. So we just haven't seen a lot of them actually end up on the team yet. But I think we're going to get there eventually.
Yeah.
So.
And I have heard that. I'm just hopeful that we get to where we have like full female teams competing against each other.
Right.
But I don't think the sport has grown enough yet, at least to my knowledge, to where there's a high demand for that. But I'm just hopeful, because just like it's been so powerful to see the influence of women's hockey in the United States, and the game is being grown by people like Hillary Knight and these amazing leaders that are getting girls into the game. I'm hopeful that we see the same thing with, not just sled hockey, but all adaptive sports. So
yeah, no, agreed. And I think you're right. Part of it is just there hasn't been the opportunity or the interest, or in some parts of the world, there just maybe hasn't been the resources. Let's face it, for women to have the same access that we see men get a lot of times. So
yeah, for sure.
But again, we could probably talk about that all day long. We could probably talk about sled hockey all day long, and maybe we'll do a bonus episode one day just highlighting the history of it as a sport. But we're going to take a quick break, and then we will talk about some more sports that are not played on frozen H2O, but the regular kind. So I'm going to take a drink of some H2O, and then we're going to be right back. All right, so as promised, let's get into the history of some other sports that involve water. And you know what? Let's get to swimming in a minute, because it's so popular that I think a lot of people know about it. But let's talk about one of the newest Olympic sports. Let's talk about surfing.
All right. So surfing has unknown origins, but may date back to ancient Polynesia, which is not entirely surprising. And it was first observed by Europeans during a 1767 voyage. So we know at least 1767, but probably a lot earlier. The first wooden boards weighed between 75 and 200 pounds, and they were 10 feet long. And I've never really surfed before, but thinking about having a 200-pound board to carry around, that sounds very intimidating. It's very impressive. Yeah. I mean, I get tired just thinking about having to haul that thing down to the beach if it was that heavy. So, I mean, that's pretty impressive, but you kind of wonder, I guess, why they were that big. But maybe it was, again, a form of transportation for early surfers, or maybe that was part of the contest of it, was being able to manage a board that was so huge. All right. So the modern board that we often see, if you ever watch surfing on TV, was designed in 1926 by American surfer Tom Blake. And then, as you may know, surfing was officially added to the Olympic Games in Tokyo 2020, and it will be back in Paris in 2024. And personally, I cannot remember if I verified that this is accurate or not, but I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to guess it's coming back for Los Angeles 2028 because I think that's going to be a big California sport.
Yeah. No, it will be back for 2028. And the thing that's interesting about 2024, even though it will be part of the Paris Games, it's not being held in France because France isn't terribly known as a surfing location. So it's this really unique situation where it will be an official medal sport for France for the Paris Games, but will not be held in Paris. And then I did not realize until recently just kind of the details of the culture around surfing as a sport. Like, I knew about surfing, I knew that there were surfing competitions, but I didn't realize how big of a deal it was and how many places it takes place and the sacrifices these athletes make to travel literally all over the world to some of the greatest surfing spots because they have to. Not everyone holds surfing competitions, so they really have to plan ahead and say, these are the competitions I'm going to this year. Here's the budget I have to have. Here's the time I'm going to need off of work, because most of them are not making enough off of it to do it full time. It really is a huge commitment. And then, Sarah, have you heard of a documentary series called 100 Foot Wave?
I have heard of it, but I have not watched it. Tell me about it.
It is so good. So it's on HBO Max, and I'm assuming regular HBO, but I don't know. I have HBO Max. And it is about this group of surfers who do big wave surfing. So it's not the type of surfing that we saw in the Tokyo Games where they're doing different tricks and they're getting points for that. These are people who go out and find the largest, honestly, most dangerous waves in the world. And there's kind of this search for finding a wave that is 100 feet high and riding on it. So it's definitely worth watching. There were episodes where it really stressed me out watching some of the things that these people do. Because again, this is not a sport like basketball or baseball or American football where there's big money or accolades to be made. These people just do it because they love doing it and the thrill that they get from it. So if you haven't seen that series, you really should take the time to go and watch it. But
I'm going to add that to my list.
And of course, throughout the Olympic Games, we'll talk a lot about swimming because it is one of the most popular summer sports. But how about we just kind of dive into at least a brief history of swimming's involvement in the Olympic Games and where it came from.
All right, so swimming pools became popular in the middle of the 19th century. In fact, by 1837, 6 indoor diving pools with diving boards had been built in London. So this is where I also kind of wonder, the same way with speed skating and using it as a mode of transportation, do we think that there might be some kind of connection way back in the day to competitive swimming with survival? I don't know. I'm just thinking hypothetically. Do you think we used to have people swimming and then racing each other and then thinking, oh, if I'm the first one there, less likely to get bit by sharks like my buddy? Swimming as an event was first added to the Olympic program in 1904 at the St. Louis Games. Mm-hmm. But the first modern Olympics in 1896 helped popularize swimming as a competitive sport, and the love just grew from there. So, swimming is still such a popular sport. So I think it is one of those things that people see it, they fall in love, and it's just blossomed. And we have all these different events now that, I mean, we find ourselves cheering for people like Caleb Dressel that they just, I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing what they do. It's amazing how fit they are. Obviously, in the United States, we have Michael Phelps, greatest of all time. It's astounding. But I also think it's really cool to see the impact that it's had on getting more people into swimming for safety purposes.
Yeah, let's go ahead and kind of transition into a part of the episode that I like to call Stuff Americans Like, which is going to cover some of the most popular sports that we have here in the States, and that has eventually spread all over the world and become popular in more places. But yeah, so let's talk about baseball real quick. Where did it come from?
All right, baseball, America's favorite pastime, right? Baseball, the baseball field was invented by Alexander Cartwright of New York in 1845. He was a member of the New York Knickerbocker Baseball Club, and he devised the first rules and regulations that established the standard for the modern game of baseball. Baseball unofficially debuted at the 1904 games, and it was contested as a demonstration sport at the 1912 games, but became official in 1992 at the Barcelona games, and it was part of the program through 2008. Then it took a break, and then it was brought back for Tokyo 2020.
Which makes sense because baseball is incredibly popular in Japan. So I was glad to see it back, even though I love going to baseball games. I like the sport personally, but I know a lot of people struggle with it because the games are really long. We have gone to many a baseball game where, you know, my wife just kind of kept looking over and saying, "Can we leave yet? Can we leave yet?" Because the games do go on so long. But she does it for me. She loves me. But I was glad to see it back, even if it didn't end the way I was hoping for it to for Team USA.
Yeah. I don't believe it is on the program for 2024 in Paris. However, I'm hopeful for 2028 because the Olympics being in the United States, I think that bodes well for baseball and for softball. So let's talk about softball. Yeah, softball was invented in 1887 by George Hancock. He was a reporter for the Chicago Board of Trade. It was originally intended as a form of indoor baseball to play when it was cold, which I think is really interesting. According to Wikipedia, the first game was played indoors inside the Farragut Boat Club in Chicago. The first game of softball came from a football game between Yale and Harvard. When it was announced that Yale had won, Yale alumni in excitement threw a boxing glove at a Harvard supporter. The Harvard supporter playfully swung at it as spectators looked on in interest. And here we go. So George Hancock shouted, "Let's play ball," and tied the boxing glove into the shape of a ball. The men chalked a diamond shape onto the floor and broke a broom handle to serve as a bat. This is credited as the first softball game, which was played on Thanksgiving Day, November 24th, 1887. So fascinating history. We know why it's called softball. And in the beginning, it was actually a men's sport.
Yeah, and all of that was really surprising to me. There's a lot happening there. I mean, you've got people wanting to play indoor baseball. You've got people who are a part of a boating club. You've got two of the most prestigious schools in the U.S. in a rivalry with someone throwing a boxing. I don't know what's going on here, but it sounds incredibly chaotic, and yet it gave us softball. So I don't know what else to say other than this is one of the most American things I've ever heard.
I mean, talking about this and how some of the other sports have been born and evolved, I think my new goal in life is that I want to be there when a new sport is accidentally discovered. I mean, to be in that crowd and say, "Oh yeah, I was there when softball was invented." And here's how it happened. And then softball, as we know it today, it debuted in the 1996 games, and it was in the Olympics through 2008. Then it was removed, and it also came back for 2020.
Yeah, so it kind of parallels baseball, which begs the question, if it was created originally by men, for indoor baseball playing, how did it become known as a women's sport? Like, what happened there? I mean, women can and actually do play baseball, contrary to popular belief. I mean, I've seen A League of Their Own, so I know it's happened in real life, but what transpired to make it deemed a girls' game versus, quote-unquote, a boys' game?
Yeah, that's a great question. And A League of Their Own. There's no crying in baseball. Oh, it's such a good movie.
Oh, yeah.
So according to an NPR article about women's baseball, the separation of baseball for men and softball for women was a result of Title IX, a 1972 law mandating gender equity in federally funded education programs. Essentially, the law states that women and men's sports should be funded equally, not that they should have participation in the same sports. So because softball and baseball were deemed by schools as equivalent sports, under the new law, schools could legally deny girls in baseball so long as they offered softball.
So essentially, just to kind of synthesize everything that was happening there, it became a girl sport because schools, federally funded schools, did not want girls playing baseball. So they said, as long as we offer softball, they can play that and we can keep baseball an all-male sport.
Exactly. So
God bless America. All right.
Yep. I did softball growing up. Loved it. It's a great sport. I'm so happy that it is a sport that continues to grow and be played, and hopefully it'll continue to grow.
Let's go ahead and talk real quick about basketball. Again, it's going to be a sport that comes up in the future, so we're just going to kind of briefly run through this. But the first formal rules were devised in 1892. It started out as a game where the ball would be shot into peach baskets. And then that quickly changed into iron hoops and hammock-style baskets being used a year later in 1893. So I guess finally someone came along and said, guys, we got to use these baskets for picking more peaches. You're going to have to find something else. So again, one of those kind of fun accidental things that created a sport. And then the first basketball shoes, because those are a big deal. You can't talk about basketball without talking about shoes. But the first basketball shoes, Converse All-Stars, were released in 1917. And they were made famous by the legendary Chuck Taylor, who was an early brand ambassador during the 1920s. So basketball has this long history of sports sponsorship, long before it existed in a lot of other sports as we know it today. And then it did debut at the 1936 Games in Berlin, and to this day, basketball is very popular in Germany. And then just recently in the Tokyo Games, 3x3 basketball was added, which, speaking of, Sarah, what did you think about 3x3?
I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun to watch, I thought.
Yes. I thought it was so fun to watch. And again, even my wife, who doesn't love watching a lot of sports, and for some reason she really does not like regular basketball, but she was transfixed by 3x3 and just sat there and said, this is so fun and exciting. What is going to happen? So I love it. I want it to stick around. I would love to see more of it outside of the Olympics, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. Something that I think is really interesting about 3x3 basketball is that if I remember correctly, it's the first sport that was originally at the Youth Olympic Games and ended up becoming a sport at the actual Olympic Games. So it used to be something, I guess, among younger people at international levels, and then the Olympics decided to add it. And I'm so glad they did. I think it's great.
But yeah, let's kind of wrap things up with Sarah, one of your favorites, of course, as we've already mentioned in the previous episode. But let's chat about volleyball.
Yes, I love volleyball. All right. Volleyball was invented by William Morgan in 1895, which is a little bit late compared to many of these other sports that were almost in the 1900s. But it was invented at the Holyoke, Massachusetts YMCA. It was originally called Mintonette, later renamed to volleyball when a spectator commented that the game involved a great deal of volleying. So again, I would just love to be there when a sport gets its name, when it's invented, when some random spectator changes the name of a game forever.
I love that because I can just see that they sat around for so long coming up with the name Mintonette, and we're like, this is such a good name, guys. This is solid. This is going to stick. And then as soon as someone's like, there's a lot of volleying happening, them going, dang it, that's such a better name for this sport. And then it just completely changing. I love that. That's so fun.
Yeah. Volleyball was added in the 1964 Tokyo Games. And then beach volleyball was a demonstration sport at the 1992 Games and became a medal event in 1996 at the Atlanta Olympics. Now, something that I've heard rumors to keep an eye on is, have you heard of snow volleyball?
No, but please tell me about it. I'm here for it.
All right. So it started to get a lot of traction in the Pyeongchang Olympics in 2018. People were just playing it in the Olympic Village for fun, like other, I think, athletes. And it was a demonstration sport where people in the village could see it. So I think that they had people who play snow volleyball a lot. It wasn't, I don't think, like the historical demonstration sports necessarily where it got a lot of attention. But there are people who play snow volleyball. It's very similar to beach volleyball, but in the snow. And if I remember this accurately, they have teams with more people. So I want to say it was 4 to 6 people. It's been a while since I checked into it, but there's a lot of speculation about, could snow volleyball eventually make it to the Winter Olympics? I don't know if there's actually a federation yet. I don't know if there's governing bodies, but apparently there's a lot of interest there. Personally, I hate the snow. Give me the summer. I like to watch snow sports. I like to watch ice sports, but you will not find me digging in snow to get a volleyball up in the air. It's just not going to happen.
I mean, I've never heard of this or seen it until this moment, and I can already tell you I would love to watch it. Like, I'm 100% on board. Let's make snow volleyball a thing. I don't know that I'll be the one playing it. No one wants to see me playing volleyball, honestly, but I will gladly watch it. So that's incredible. And frankly, kind of backtracking a little bit to beach volleyball, it surprises me a bit that it took that long for beach volleyball to be added to the games, because I don't know, in my brain, I associate volleyball so much with the beach. It's just kind of this classic Americana, right? Of going to the beach and hitting around a volleyball. So it's funny to me, I guess, that it took that long, the 92 games, for it to even be demonstrated. And then Atlanta for it to be a medal event. That's insane to me. But
it seems really recent.
Yes, it does. I'm starting to get to that age where I realize I'm older than I actually think I am, and so the 96 games, I'm realizing, oh yeah, I guess that was a while ago, but to me, it still feels like
don't say
it just happened.
I know.
All right. Well, as we've already kind of said, we'll definitely talk more about these sports and plenty of others as we get into each of the games and talk about the history of when things were added, when things disappeared. And while you could actually probably create an entire podcast on each of these sports, and let's face it, someone probably has, we're not going to do that, and at least this has hopefully provided some clarity and some context on where sports came from, how they found their way into the Olympic and Paralympic movement. And for now, we're going to kind of wrap things up and get back to our lives, because it's late and I'm starting to get a little sleepy.
All right, if you enjoyed this episode,
and we really hope you did,
you can help share the Games Odyssey by rating, reviewing, and subscribing. You can also find us online at gamesodyssey.com, where you can sign up for our weekly newsletter for more Games Odyssey content. That's the word games and Odyssey, ODYSSEY.com. You can find us on our Facebook page, the Games Odyssey Podcast, on Instagram at Games Odyssey Pod, or on Twitter, you guessed it, at Games Odyssey Pod.
You can also help us grow the show by sharing it with your friends, your family, your enemies, just random strangers that you meet on the street, because it never goes badly if you just talk to strangers, right? But talk to anyone who you know loves the games, and if you feel so inclined, you can also become a show sponsor, which will get you access to exclusive content like this practice episode, and also some golden giveaways that we'll be doing in the future. But until next time, au revoir! The Games Odyssey Podcast is a production of Wardrobe Media, LLC. This episode was written, hosted, produced, and edited by Jonathan Jordan, and co-hosted by Sarah Patton. Show notes, including research sources and transcripts, can be found on our website, gamesodyssey.com. Olympic is a trademark of the United States Olympic and Paralympic Committee, USOPC. Any use of Olympic in the Games Odyssey podcast is strictly for informational, commentary, and educational purposes. The Games Odyssey podcast is not an official podcast of the USOPC and is not sponsored, endorsed, or officially affiliated with the USOPC or the International Olympic Committee or International Paralympic Committee. The content of Games Odyssey podcast does not reflect the opinions, standards, views, or policies of the USOPC, and the USOPC in no way warrants that content featured in the Games Odyssey podcast is accurate.